We are live. Welcome to Social Business Hour, episode number 3. Or if you're counting, there was 31 of Social Selling Hours last year. Episode number 3 of Social Business Hour on this January 19th, Martin Luther King holiday. And actually, we will get into our guest real quick, but it'll actually probably be January 20th, where he's at by the time we wrap this up. But how are you doing? As always, my awesome co-host, Rachel Miller. How are you, Rachel?
I'm fantastic. Super excited for today's discussion.
So we're always honored and excited to have some awesome guests on the show. Not only awesome guests, but leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs in social selling, social business. Today we're talking social influence as our third of our 3 back-to-back episodes on social influence. And not only is it dedication that we have a CEO here, but we have one that's across the pond. It's 11-ish, I hear, over there. How are you doing today, Guy?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing great. We appreciate you staying up late and getting a hall pass to hang out with us. So give us a little background about yourself, about the company, where exactly you are, and what time it is there.
So we're based in Israel right now, and it's 11 p.m. here, so pretty early. And I'm one of the founders of Twtrland. We're a social intelligence platform. Basically, we help people use data to do better marketing, smarter marketing.
And so when you're, I've used your tool for a while. Can you give us like some use cases and some background, not only on where the tool started and like kind of how you came across the company and where you're going, like what problems you're solving?
Okay, so it all started more than 3 years ago now. Basically started as a personal need of one of the founders, which started using Twitter pretty heavily and was really looking into Twitter profiles and was saying to himself, how am I supposed to go over hundreds of tweets of anyone that I'm coming across and really understanding who they are? And basically from that point onwards, we've built this platform that initially just takes into account millions of tweets out there for anybody at all and builds a profile. So we analyze the entire social graph behind Twitter and today also some other networks. And we build very deep profiles that really tell you the story behind the person, who they are, their main metrics, what kind of content they share, how much links they share, how much engagements they get, what kind of topic they discuss, and so on and so forth. And basically, it was a tool initially that would help you just understand people that you meet, when you're across Twitter. As you all know today, it has evolved so much further. We have anything from monitoring and analytics capabilities to one of the most advanced influencer searches out there. It's an engine that goes into more than 200 million profiles. It integrates Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and much, much more.
So I'm really excited to learn more about the product. It's been a few months since I've played with it, and I know several of our community members started trials the last few days, so they're eager to learn more also. But to get the conversation started, we asked everybody this month the same question. What does the term social influence mean to you, Guy?
Okay. So first, influence. We all have influence. Each and every one of us influences some of his peers in different ways, some more than others. Up to a few years ago, before the internet and social became so addictive, usually the only influencers out there were celebrity and endorsements. Eventually, when social became as it is today, it has opened an opportunity for just about anyone, to come and build an online presence, and from that become influential in specific niche topics that eventually can impact also businesses. And for me at least, this is influence. This opportunity that social media has opened, to the middle layer of people not the big, celebrities.
Yeah, I agree. I
ahead.
think the term, I think we're calling it micro-influence. I don't know if that's popped up in a lot of the conversations you've had recently, but it's definitely one that I've read about recently.
Yeah,
There is a very...
Go
Go ahead.
Sorry.
There is a very nice story that I like about hash puppies. That once upon a time they went into schools in the U.S. and they were asking the kids, who's the queen of the class, who is the king of the class, who's the most influential kid around here? And then they came to Rachel, and Rachel said, oh, it's Brian. They went to Brian. Brian said, no, it's John. And eventually they came to one or two kids that said, yes, it's us. And they just gave them shoes, and they just went around to several schools like that, and this popped up their popularity immensely. And this is really, the essence of social influence today.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we've had, now this is you're our third leader on talking kind of social influence and really what influence is as a whole. And not only has everyone's kind of referenced the idea that the conversation has drastically changed, and I think that kind of reaches back to the idea that thanks to social we all have the ability to tell our own story, be our own sales, be our own promoter. But I also think as social has involved, so has the technology, so has really how we leverage these tools. I mean, I posted a blog post the other day on 40 tools I use for personal branding, and then I'm working one right now where I'm going over the tools that I leverage and utilize for monitoring and managing influencers. Of course, referencing your tool as well as our past guests with Metal and Tracker. But I think the other thing has been the tools that really understand influence also understand social well enough to know they have to evolve. So as Twtrland has evolved over the years, how is not only the inspiration changed, but how has the direct use cases of the tool itself for your customers changed as social has kind of impacted it as well?
So I think the main changes in terms of the use cases are more environmental. I mean, they're social as a whole. When social is evolving around the globe, the use cases evolve. And there are so many of them that, it's really, really wide. From building personas to monitoring brands, benchmarking brands, understanding content, analyzing content, targeting for advertising, and much, much more.
So, I'm a fan of your tool. I use it because I like there's not only influencer management, but you also kind of have a heavy, you talk about content, you talk about the community, so there's community analysis built into the tool as well. And I think that's kind of one of these conversations which, our listeners and those that are joining us on Twitter are talking about right now, just the idea of building relationships, holding dialogue. Andy Yo, who I give a shout out because I'm a big fan of, he's a Hootsuiter who's over in APAC and usually can't join us, so he's jumping in on Twitter. And he had a good comment. He said, it's holding a dialogue, building relationships, genuine connections. It's about quality over quantity. And I do love that in Twtrland there's the ability to kind of see all of those things that are that relationship with the community. Was that always the inspiration of the tool, or is that kind of grown over time with the idea of community being such more of a focus of businesses today?
Well, all of these are key metrics when building social media marketing. You need to think about social media marketing as communication, as engagement, not as pushing out links. You cannot push out your product. You need to build relationships. It's like you're walking in the street and you're talking to people. Unless you talk with them and unless you give them value, you're wasting your time.
No, I completely agree. Engagement is definitely a metric that we're putting a lot more weight on over the last couple of years, and the community part is one of the reasons why I love Twtrland, because you can really clearly see who someone is talking to and the effect that they're having. I like how you rank like the number of conversations. Then you can click through and see who those people are in turn talking to. So it's a nice little web of influence that you can discover.
Thank you. So one of the most important metrics that I point out in the profiles is, for instance, the the distribution of content or of activity of any account out there. So, I mean, if you have 90% of your activity that you're sharing out links, you know, you have to consider that both as someone that, you know, if you're going to follow someone that shares 90% links and they tweet like 50 times a day, you need to expect that. And also as a company, if you're building your strategy in terms of content, you need to look at your landscape and analyze what your competitors do, and based on that decide, okay, I need to have 50% of my activities maybe for engagement, maybe to build an engaging audience and not only to promote myself. If all you do is promote yourself, it will not work.
So that's an interesting, discussion too, because I think actually we had on the podcast that I host with Daniel Newman called Smack Talk. We were talking actually with episode that hasn't been released today with one of the leaders over at IBM, and how they kind of really focus on engagement and talk about employee advocacy and tell their employees that really you're not going to be a thought leader or influential unless you're providing value. You can't actually worry about the conversion on your owned assets unless you're providing value up front. And I love that you're kind of not only leading that same charge, but you're providing a way for us to actually measure that, because I think the hard part with influence as well as social is how do you tie all these conversations together, as well as tie that knowledge to the actual, to the not only the person but the community. I think we have to really focus on that person's relationship with the community. So I'm curious, when someone's talking, and I'll bring it up now before someone else brings it up in our debate, is the word influence unfortunately has been linked to clout, because clout, I think has a big name out there for a long while. But I think unfortunately their way of going about it, the non-transparent way, has kind of alienated or polarized some people that have gamified it or taken advantage of it. So I like that, is there a reason that you haven't put like a direct metric on overall, or is it because this whole community one, you kind of like take a different approach than typical clout?
So we've been asked so many times to do that. We think that the best way to do, to help people understand others on social is just to give them all the tools, all the metrics that are possible, as transparent as possible, as objective as possible, and this is the way that we chose. So as part of the metrics that we did, we tell you about any account, their activity levels in terms of how many tweets per day do they usually post, how many posts per week on Facebook, and so on and so forth, how popular they are. We're measuring how many retweets they get back per any 100 tweets that they post, and so on for Facebook and Instagram. And same goes for communicativity. We also measure, like Rachel said, like who they actually talk with. So we have their closest network that you can actually go through and see who they talk with.
Yeah, I think I'm actually sharing on Twitter right now. I just took a screenshot of my interface live because you break down like social account performance into activity, which unfortunately if people follow me on Twitter, they know my activity is on the extreme side. But activity, popularity, and then communicativity. So I like that. Yeah, which I love that idea. I love that because you break it down on those three elements. How is that conversation put out there from a business perspective? Because I think the reason people are requesting that and everyone's asking you for one score is businesses still want the easy button when it comes to social, and they want the easy button when it comes to influence. They just say, give me the people that I can go promote and my people listen to. And it's definitely not easy, but I'm curious, how do you revert that conversation back and explain how you kind of provide that value?
Okay, so first of all, there isn't a one-button solution. Automated DMs, automated messaging, all of these do not work. You can tell yourself your reaction when you follow someone and you get the auto DM.
Yeah, well,
what do you do?
Yeah, it's an unfollow. I actually had I was trying to get it trending the other day on Rachel was actually the guest on Media Chat, on our chat. I was putting out there "stop auto DMs" as my hashtag to get people to get that, because they forgot the first word of social media, the social element.
Yeah, it's impossible. Now, if you look at the profiles, what we did add and it's been there very, very recently, so you might have not seen it yet. But on the top right-hand corner, if you look at your own profile, you'll see top 1%.
Yep.
This is our solution today, to that easy number. Tell me, how high this guy is. So we go from top 20% and then up. So top 20% would be the lowest, influential level that we would score, and then it would go up. So top 1% is very nice.
Thank you. So no, and one of the things, I think it's interesting on, lots of people coming in the Twitter feed, and Dave Stein, one of our previous guests, people want easy buttons, want solutions that don't work, quoting your quote on the element of really what, the easy button doesn't exist. But one of the things that I firmly believe in, every conversation we've had, the word trust and the word relationships is always coming up. And unfortunately, trust and relationships, you usually don't link that to a tool, right? That's a people problem that you have to first solve. And you have to do that by being, social and being a person, and then leveraging these tools. So I'm a geek for social data. I love that your tool kind of builds social data out across the board. But when we're kind of getting into, I guess, the next question here is really personal branding. You kind of talked about it earlier, and I would love for you to expand on the idea or your vision on self-promotion. And I like to say we've reached a culture that is, if you're really good at humble bragging, you can provide value, talk about the how and the why without feeling like you're just a over promoter. But there's a very gray line. It's hard to kind of balance the two. So personal branding being that huge component, what are some of those first steps for someone building that online persona and how they can leverage not only this kind of data, but their personal brand?
Okay, so two main things. First, don't promote yourself. Build value. If you give value, that is the best promotion you can do for yourself. Now, if you want to learn more how to do it, the best way would be to open a few profiles on Twtrland of successful people brands, and I can give you a few names, you yourself included, and then just browse through the different elements that they do. Learn their strategy and just build based on that. For instance, how much of your activity should be engaging with others, what kind of people you should follow, what kind of content you want to post in each different channel, how frequent you want to post that, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's funny because that's probably the most, the most popular question I always get is, what tools do I use? And then the second one is always, what should I tweet or how often? And I reply back every time with, you'll never hear someone say you're providing too much value or you're helping too much. So the amount of tweets doesn't matter as long as it's valuable and providing value. And I think that's an important aspect here. I'm curious from the standpoint of when we're talking personal branding and we're talking about this idea of not promoting, where do you kind of see content's role in there? Because the idea of a blog post, and actually Jay Bear on Jay Today had a really good Jay Bear concept on where he was talking about using the storytelling in that blog content to show your thought leadership and then not having to tell that story on social media. You almost let your blog do a lot of your personal brand storytelling. So I'm curious how your thoughts are on that and really how people can leverage, where can they promote themselves without doing it overly promotional like on social or on Twitter or those areas?
If you're talented enough and you can write a blog that is interesting, that is authentic, that is something that you give from yourself, from your own personal experience, it will drive itself. You would only have to get it, to the right people initially, and it will drive itself. And with this point, I can maybe share the story of how Twtrland launched.
Love to hear it.
So this was 3 years ago. We had nothing. I mean, everything was very, very initial. We've been building this, first initial website that provides profiles on Twitter entities. And if you guys have the screenshots that I've shared with you prior, this will be the good time to share them. And we had something, something minimal. The MVP was ready, or was, close to be ready. And we were saying maybe we should launch it, maybe we should not. we just reached out to a local blogger, someone that is really influential in technology, but not, it's not so Scoble. He wasn't then at Scoble. His name is Hillel Fuld, Hills Fuld, HILZFULD, Twitter handle. He just got it and he said, wow, I love it. He tweeted about it. He was basically our visitor number one. Within 1 hour, we had 1,000 visitors in the website and 70 new tweets. Now, this is a new product. It's a new website. No one knew about it an hour before. Okay, by 3 hours later, we had a few reporters around the world write about it. A few hours later, we had Alyssa Milano tweet about it. And then within a week, we had posts in more than 10 languages around the world. And then Mashable posted about us. And then what happened was the server went down. Which is basically, a dream come true for a startup that just launched a site a week ago. And this just shows, the immense power that the right person with the right influence in your specific niche market can have on a product that otherwise would have, just lied there, and no one would ever have used it.
So to go a little bit deeper, because I know everyone's like, well, that's kind of the dream scenario, but how do you replicate that? Did Hillel use specific hashtags, or was it just because he had a really high engagement rate on his network on Twitter? Like, how did it amplify so quickly?
So as far as I recall, no hashtags were used. This guy really has a very engaging community. He builds it from scratch. He talks throughout the day, 24/7. I don't know how he does that, but he's 24/7 online. And I have a lot of respect for him, as someone who uses social very, very well. And it just blew like fire. It went to places that we wouldn't imagine it would go so quickly. And today we have over 2 million monthly visitors, and a large part of that is we owe him.
So and that's an interesting. Just the idea of how not only that people always talk about, or I say people. I think the idea of going viral is something someone says, and really going viral is great because it lands on YouTube and it goes on the TV screen. But I think more important than going viral is that it actually relates and builds with your audience. And there's definitely a difference between audience and influencer. And so if an influencer can actually relate that content to their audience, and the audience it goes viral in the audience, I think maybe that's the conversation we have to focus on. Rather than going viral on the internet, you should focus on going viral with your target audience, because that's where it's true value. And
exactly.
I'm curious, from your experience, even from a tool growth, with all of this focus and change, not only on the tool, but in social media, in influencers, in marketing, with employee advocacy, how do you stay ahead of the curve as far as seeing where things are going, understanding, where do you focus your attention on understanding where this kind of market is going when it comes to influencer and social in general?
So, we're living in the market. I can tell you myself and a few other people in the company are speaking with clients 24/7. And this is why it's not really strange for me to be up at the office at this hour, since you guys in the West Coast don't wake up too early. But really, it's evolving so quickly, and there is so much to do. And there is only so much that you can do in terms of how fast you catch up. But we have so many plans for 2015, and I hope that we amaze you guys this year.
Well, from another standpoint of personal branding, so there's lots of things that go into personal branding. I think we kind of cover. There's lots of people. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot in the Twitter feed, and once again, shout out to everybody on Twitter that's kind of sharing their insights, and your Twitter notifications will be blowing up. Just a warning, guy. That even at 11 o'clock, you're going to see like the number 99 up there at the top there. But one of the things that I hear or see a lot of people talking about is really being yourself is a big element there, and understanding your own element. And I've used that experience for me. I focused a lot for when I started on social on trying to figure out what others wanted me to tweet. And then when I switched it and just started being myself and sharing what I found valuable, the engagement, everything kind of switched. But I'm curious, when we're thinking in that personal branding atmosphere, how do you, if someone wants to connect with their community while building their personal brand, what are some of the things that you see that work for people? Even from the standpoint of some of the people you referenced when you were growing your company, how can they get on your radar so that they have a chance to promote and share and provide value for their community?
So first, it has to be something that that is close to their heart. You can't speak about something in an authentic way if you don't really live in it. So I mean, I can speak about fashion, but it's not going to work. I can blog about fashion, but who cares? I don't have anything to do with fashion. But if I speak about technology, about startups, about marketing, advertising, social media, these are things that I can talk about. I have something to say. So if you're being authentic and you're telling something that is interesting and you're sharing some of your experience, which would give value to people, this is the only way that you should go.
So we have a great tweet from our friends at VSnap, and they're saying that it's easier to add personality than to create value. So if you can do the latter well, the hard part's over. So with that in mind, does having a great personality, or at least creating a great online persona, lead to value, in your opinion?
I think so. It's not always. I've seen cases where even if you don't have a great personality, but you're able to manufacture one on social, it works. But who you are, how you present yourself. If you manage to present yourself, in a good way on social, that's good as well.
Yeah, truly, social does seem to amplify your personality, good and bad.
Correct.
I know we've all seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Actually, that's a question I'll throw out to the Twitter community. If you can share either a great or just drastically horrible experience that you've had with someone showing their personality online, I think that would be entertaining.
Well, and I think that that also goes into the idea, if you're crappy offline, you're crappy online. But also when it comes to like employee advocacy and influencers, if your company isn't good at building those relationships with your employees, engaging your employees, engaging the influencers, you're going to suck at influence online as well. Like you can't masquerade those two. And I think that's partially this culture conversation is if you don't have a culture that actually grows and fosters this kind of development, it starts with that leadership. Like I said, we had IBM on earlier, and Sandy Carter is someone that does an amazing job as a social leader. So it's no wonder that IBM is a great social business company because they have leaders that are actively doing it. You have someone to look up to. You can watch and monitor. So I'm curious, one of my favorite hashtags lately to follow is kind of social CEO or understanding that the social executive. So this kind of question is not really on our list of questions. I'm curious from a standpoint of executive buy-in of social and how that kind of talks to thought leadership, personal branding, and that whole influencer relationship. Where do you see that going? Because I don't believe that every CEO must be on social media full-time, but I believe that if you're not out there telling your story, I mean, there's nobody better to tell your story. I mean, that's why, Guy, we have you on. We're a fan of your team. I know Ron on your team is someone that I engage with actively all over the place on social media. He's really good, engaging. But if I want to hear the story of Twtrland, I'm going to you, the CEO. And I think that's part of that value of these social executives is they want the story. They're the ones that are passionate. How do we kind of convey that conversation when it comes to a social executive?
So really the best thing would be that the executive layer of the company is promoting the company on social, but it's not always the case, as you've said. It's the best way to do it. Social is a lot of work, though. Someone has to actually work and build the company as well, and not everyone can do it or are able to do it. I think that most of the younger companies today actually do that, and most of the successful younger companies today do that in a great way. Look at Moz, for instance, Rand, Rand Fishkin.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the greatest examples. The guy is huge. And also Sandy, which is a very, very unique and very special person, has managed to do that for a large enterprise such as IBM. Not simple at all. But many others, usually the larger enterprises, have difficulties in doing that. And even more specifically, when it comes to employee advocacy, this is really tough when you're looking at a big enterprise, a big company with thousands of employees. You really need someone who knows the business upstairs in order to actually teach these people what to do, how to behave, how to promote their company on social. It's not it's not as simple as it sounds.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think those that are not involved in it and those leaders that don't do that think it is simple. They do. Not only do they think there's an easy button, or they're saying all you're doing is sitting on Twitter all day posting 140 characters. And if they really listened, they would actually see that you're providing value, you're sharing, you're building these relationships, you're answering questions. I mean, at the end of the day, part of Social Selling Hour that I thought was amazing last year is we had all these guests on every week, and they would always talk about the goal is they're solving their problem, building that relationship so they can buy from you later and down the road. And actually Janet Fouts on Twitter put out there just now, the worst thing you can do is fake your persona. What will the contact think when they actually finally meet you? So sometimes I think people forget that element is that to make this conversation, I believe that social is amazing, but the handshake and the in real life things are really a bridge to where you're going. If you suck online or you're fake online, you better be really good at faking it in person. You better be a better poker player, face to face. So I think that's an interesting aspect as we talk about these personal brands and even executives. And I was curious from from your experience, maybe even internationally, how is personal branding kind of interpreted or looked at over there compared to what it is here in the U.S.? Are you guys as into it as we are here, or how does that kind of work from an international perspective?
Well, unfortunately, Twitter in Israel is not really strong. And in general, the US leads with everything that has to do with social media. I can tell you that from my perspective, when I'm looking with my clients and everything, US is definitely number one and not far behind the UK.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of great things coming out of the UK, and I've been building relationships and friends over there, and even Australia. Australia seems to be another one of those that's really grasped the idea of social, and maybe it's because part of it is if you're passionate, fun-loving people that really just want to engage with people, the element of social is pretty easy to use. And we have actually one of our bloggers on our website who posted his first blog today on Millennial CEO, Andrew Hutchinson. He's from Australia. One of the guys I engage with, have great relationship with, and we connected via social. I read everything he posts. And it's funny how it's not that simple, like you said, but a leader, if they're not understanding or embracing social or even paying attention enough to see that, I'm curious, I love social data. I think data is the answer to all of these underlying things. I think we build relationships, but I think data is how we tell the business and we prove its value, because I use the term, and I will drop another hashtag that I'm popular for, is screenshot awesomeness. And I talk about the idea that you should capture all of the data along the way as you're going to a sale, so that when someone asks you, like, how did this happen? What was the value? You document everything. And I know with your tool, you give all the data. Like, I love that it's not filtered, but it's not also overwhelming. You do a good job of kind of breaking it up. How can data play a role in personal branding that will lead to influence for these brands?
Okay, first of all, do you know Gary V's talk about ROI?
Oh yes, a big time.
Okay.
I'm a big Gary V fan.
So that is many times when I'm speaking to clients, they're like, okay, how do I measure the ROI? How do I show my boss the ROI of my social activities? How do I make them understand the value because they this and that, and they don't want to invest so much in social? And all I do is I'm telling them, listen, here is the link, go see this, and this always works. ROI of Social Media by Gary Vee. If you haven't seen it so far, go and watch it.
Definitely. And I don't even think really the ROI story. I think part of what we've kind of learned is this idea that if you can map the path to purchase, and really not even really map the path to purchase, but map the path to success. I mean, it doesn't have to be purchase in the long run. It can be customer growth. It can be audience aware. It can be all of these other things. I think just documenting them with data to really back up all of these things that you're doing is really that key, especially from personal branding's perspective. I think they're just, unfortunately, people, hey, I'm going to create a website, I'm going to do all these things, but if it doesn't link to your strategy and ultimately your even personal goals, then why are you doing it? You're going to end up being a big time suck for a lot of people. So when we're talking about tactics for what are some tactics to avoid when starting to build your personal brand? And I know we talked auto DM, that's an easy one, I think, but one of the other things that I was curious about from a standpoint of the data that you're gathering is this gamification element, or this idea, like I'm a big fan of gamification, but not gaming the system, where too often people just post content and create content for content's sake. They think that if they're tweeting 100 times a day, that they have more influence than if they tweet 20 times a day. And I'd argue 5 great tweets outweighs any number of 100 tweets that you're going to send. But what are some other tactics that they should avoid that maybe were used to be the okay way to doing things, but now have changed?
First of all, never over-promote yourself. I've said it before, I must repeat it again, because I have many people coming to me and saying, listen, I tried, I found 100 people that are relevant to my niche. I tweeted them all a link to my product, and no one responded. And I'm like, well, look at your profile and see what each of them saw when you tweeted at them. You saw a profile that just pushes out 100 links, which all look the same. It looks like a machine. These things never work. Okay, so first thing, do not promote yourself. I mean, almost at all. You need to create value. Once you create value and you create relationships, you find relevant people to connect with, communicate with them, talk with them, build relationships, build an engaging audience. Once you have an engaging audience and you want to share something new about your product with them, they will react. If you have a question that you want to, ask them as a group that knows something in your space, they will react.
No, it's really quite elementary. We just need to give more. I think people on social really skip those first basic steps and they just ask right away. And our friend Ali from AG Salesworks tweeted out that instead of just retweeting an article, you should make the effort to actually read it and comment, which means a lot more. And that's definitely a challenge that I've been working on daily. It's one of my goals for this year, for sure. I think that's kind of the element of building your network is you give, you engage, you communicate. Don't just go for the ask.
Yeah, and it's a big problem today because there is so much content out there. And people just share more and more and produce more and more content, and it's not very easy for us to read everything, especially today when you're following so many people in so many different networks, and each one of them produces their own content but also shares content of others. It's really hard to filter which one of them you actually want to read, because no one of us really has time to read everything.
And that's right. I know I've been loving Metal. We had Vidar Brecki was our first guest this month, and tools like Scoopit and Metal really are changing the game because they give you a reason to read, and I think that's important. It's that context with the content, and I'm loving this trend.
And I think that's Tariq jumped in on Twitter and said, "Don't feel obligated to say yes to everyone and everything. Select the people and content that's fitting to you to share." I think that's a pretty, poignant way of saying, and I think that also goes into this idea that, if you're not creating your own content and you're not sharing, find unique ways to tell your story. And I'm not only compelled to tell these two companies who do a great job of engaging the community, but we have MoviStream and VSnap, two video conversational tools, and not only do they communicate on the community all the time, but their tools are really another way of finding a way to relate with your audience, connecting, sharing your story. Because I'm not a great blogger when it comes down to just sitting and hammering out a blog, but if you can find other ways, podcasting, videos, all of these different things. Those are all things that you can relate with your audience in new ways, and I think that's kind of an exciting trend that we're seeing, and companies like that embrace in their community, but give people a different way to tell their story. So we're going to jump into the next one here. So when we're going through with question 6 here, we're going to talk about clear advantages when engaging with influencers. So how do you identify who will be the best to be able to increase your brand awareness? So let's flip it to the brand side, or maybe the leader side. How do they not only understand who, but how to engage them?
Okay, so first of all, finding relevant people, not easy. There are hundreds of millions of people out there. You need to find a list of whatever, 100 or 1,000, depending on what you're doing, what the campaign you're doing. You might want them from a specific locality. Your business might be into a specific niche. The first thing would be to build your persona, meaning as a business, to really understand who you're trying to target, who is the audience that you're trying to target, and based on that, go and look for the relevant influencers. Now, when you're building your persona, you must take data into consideration. You might think your target audience is one, but once you actually look at the data, it might turn out to be that it's a completely different target audience that you should be reaching out to. And this happens a lot. Second step would be to find the people. Once you know who you're looking for, say you're looking for whatever influencers that are into fashion from San Francisco and New York, there are different ways to do that. For instance, we provide a search engine where you can just go and search for people based on different filters and criteria. You can set up keyword trackers. So if you're looking just for people mentioning specific items or specific sub-brands, you can do that and then filter them. You can go into fan base of companies in your landscape. For instance, if you're doing fashion, you can go into DKNY, look at the people that mention them or people that follow them, filter them by different parameters, and go from there, manage them all into different lists, open each and every one of them of their profiles, understand them, see who they are, see that they really are relevant for your business and for the campaign. If you're doing a dinner event in New York, you're going to need a certain kind of influencers. If you're sending out whatever $500 bags, giveaways, you'll need a different kind of people. So it's really it's not an easy process. It's something that needs to be done very carefully, and eventually it's paid out.
No, I love that you mentioned knowing who your customer is, like truly using the data and creating an ideal customer persona. So many businesses skip that step, and you really can't use a tool like yours, Twtrland or Tracker, without knowing, because you're aiming at the wrong target. So I think that's something people look at the customers that you've won over the last few years, look at the ones that you've lost, and create your truly right customer is the absolute first step. And it's very frustrating. I find out daily when I'm talking to people that they don't have any idea. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're just shouting for no reason.
Yeah, there is a great blog post about that by Mike King. I pull rank his Twitter handle. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it.
No, I'll find that and I'll share that because that's definitely something I've been advocating lately. Know your customer.
Well, it's funny because I think part of this tool, and really it plays into what I know Rachel loves and believes in and does better than I think just about anybody that's out there, is the idea of not only listening, but listening and showing you care and letting people know that you listen. Yes, anyone can listen. You can set up all these tools and these things, but if you're not actively doing something when you're listening or actually taking action and building those relationships, or even, we talk about that app called Refresh.io, where I was laughing that I was getting on a conference call and it popped up and said, just a reminder, this person's birthday was 2 weeks ago. Ask them how they celebrated. And I thought it was funny, that this tool does a great job, and some people might call that stalkerish. But I also think there's an element there where that kind of data, I went on there and I was like, hey, I saw your pictures on Instagram about your birthday. how was your week? And and that is the things that we have to be able to doing with social listening. That I think too often people think listening just means casting a big net, and when they cast that big net, they don't do anything with it, and then we're just adding to a big data problem in the end.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's going back to cold calls.
Yeah, and I wonder, I even believe, it's almost like there's no excuse for a cold call anymore. Who is not searchable on the internet today? I mean, when it comes down to it, not only, and if you can't find them, you can know enough about their company to understand their culture, to understand how you relate. Like those kind of things, I think, are things that we kind of grow and build with, not only with a tool, but understanding where people engage on that side. So one of the other things that I think we like to talk about here is just from a social selling as a term, as well as influencers and social business. What are the how do these buzzwords come in to play when it comes to this influence discussion? I think when we're talking influence, is it more about the companies empowering their employees to become thought leaders and engage these influencers, or can brands really reach out individually themselves as the brand and engage these influencers?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, both have to happen simultaneously in order for for the brand to be successful on social. And I think some brands do it great. But I mean, the first and most basic thing that any business today should do, they should have content creation. They should build their presence online. They should be able to react on social to people, communicating with them. They should communicate with people in their space. They should build an engaging community. Engaging community is power. It's what will drive your business to grow exponentially. Any business should do it. I really believe that social will evolve very quickly over the next few years, and that the whole layer of what we call SMBs, the small and medium businesses, will go and do social like it should be.
So I guess with that path, or with that idea, who are some of the brands that you see that are doing influencer engagement or influencer marketing well?
Well, IBM for sure. I know a few others which I am not sure that I can share right now.
I understand that side of it. Yeah, I agree, because I think it's a tough. Not only, I think it's that line where we're talking about, do you think of a brand as their logo, or do you think of the brand as the people that make up that company, which make that company great? Because I think that's partially where IBM did a great job of succeeding, is they have 400,000 employees. They're an army, but they've also done a great job of giving you someone that you picture as an IBMer, not just a blue logo. And I think there's other companies that are doing that same thing, that are starting to do that really well. It's almost the opposite of the Apple and Google concept, where they are, I can't get Google on the phone or to tweet back at me about my glitches in a Hangout. I complain about my Apple product. I have to go to the Genius. I think that trend is switching when it comes to how these brands kind of represent themselves from a employee relationship side.
Yeah, I think eventually even the big guys will become social, just like IBM has done. There is no way to run from it.
I agree. I couldn't agree with that more.
No, for me, I think it's really exciting to see how startups in particular are using social, and it's purely out of having no resources. So you have to be super creative, and you get down, guerrilla marketing, referral marketing, and that's kind of building this really solid foundation for how huge companies like IBM will behave in the future, because they'll see it works. And a lot of it is just manpower that you can amplify with tools such as the ones that we're talking about today.
Yeah. Or if they don't, maybe the smaller companies will replace them through social.
This is true.
And I think that part of the discussion, unfortunately, has always been that only startups can embrace change. And really, if IBM can do it, what the hell is anyone else's excuse? I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, they're driving it from the largest train possible.
They don't have Sandy.
This is true. Well, and and maybe that's the element, is the leadership buy-in is across the board. I mean, there isn't a senior leader that I was engaging with that not only knew who I was when I was engaging with them, but had a relationship, built up that rapport because they invest their time. And I think that's even the part of we have to reward, incentivize, and train, because I think that's where we're missing the boat when it comes to these elements. Is IBM invests in their training. I know I've done some work with Dell and SAP. They spend a lot of time training employees on how to use social, how to tell the story. And if they don't invest in that side, I think that's partially this issue when it comes to you have to trust them. But in order to trust them, you better invest in them first, or that's when the mistakes I think happen.
Yeah, but social is new. The traditional ways of marketing and advertising are really, really different. And all these big brands, have executives that are sometimes still there. A few years back. And some, unique people like Sandy can take it forward. But it's a change that will come, I think, very, very soon. Over the next decades, I think there will be a revolution in terms of the use of social media, both in SMBs and enterprise as well.
Yeah, and I think there's also the idea that we don't have to talk about it being insecure or engaging as scary as it has to be. I mean, there's people you have the Mark Cuban, where he's engaged. He's tweeting out and posting pictures and being 100% himself, but he also built an app called Cyberdust that allows executives and others to engage without it leaving a paper trail. And so I think we have to kind of switch that trend of saying just because you're using social and something lives online doesn't mean everything is exposed. There's ways to do it smart. There's ways to do it with just providing value. So I guess the last question we hear I'm curious from a tools perspective. When you see when tools that you leverage yourself on top of your own tool in Twtrland, what tools do you see? We are very lucky to have, I'd say 6 or 7 awesome people from Hootsuite in the community in Twitter today. We have IBMers that are engaging in there, and there's no surprise that these are 2 companies that get social, embrace social, have great cultures. I mean, they're embracing these communities like this because they get it. They get it. So what other tools or things do you use, either plug in with or API friendly, that others can leverage to kind of match up with this whole social solution?
Well, Hootsuite is, you don't need to mention Hootsuite. Everybody knows Hootsuite. I don't know anyone who doesn't use Hootsuite. And we do have an app on Hootsuite. Other than that, I think Buffer is a great tool and is a must-use. And the third one that I would like to point out is Nimble. A great social CRM company that we're also integrated into. If you haven't tried
I've never heard of that one.
That's funny. No, and I think actually it's interesting. The idea there is we're talking about Hootsuite when it comes to enterprise management, social engagement management. Buffer, we're scheduling, and there's content and some analysis, and then there's Nimble and Pipeline on these social CRMs that give you really good data, and it's really finding a tool suite that actually gives you that holistic view and allows you to do 1, 2, and 3 across the board. So as we're wrapping up here, the Twitter feed has been actually blowing up, so I'm excited that either everybody took off Martin Luther King holiday here and they were able to engage with us, or all of their coworkers took off and they had enough time to jump in and blow up the Twitter feed on that side. But we love the topic. We love the engagement the last 3 weeks with 3 awesome social executive thought leaders, CEOs like yourself that are in this space, that are driving change. I think change is the key element that we've learned over these 3 weeks. We're excited to have you back on a panel to kind of talk about this again, so we're going to have to keep you up one more time. Might have to give your wife another permission slip so we make sure she knows that you're hanging out with us at the office late at night. But where can people find you, sign up for the tool? Give us a little bit about that side to make sure that people kind of jump in and embrace the power that is Twtrland.
Okay, so Twtrland.com, TWTRLAND.com. This is the website. There is a very, very big portion of it that is completely free. You can just, make a use of that as much as you'd like. If you want to get more, and we have much, much more inside, we have monitoring analytics, benchmarking, industry analysis, a very, very, very unique influencer search engine, the ability to tag people and manage them into lists, and much, much more. You can try out the Pro. The Pro has 14 days free trial, so feel free to use it. Any questions, we have a great support team. We think support is number one. We always respond very, very quickly to any questions or any issues, and we would love to have you there.
I can vouch for that because I remember, I think our first engagement, I had reached out and I was like, I was using the free tool and I was like, man, I wish it could do A, B, and C. And I think it was in a matter of minutes. We were engaged. We went back and forth on DM. And you're like, well, that's in Pro. Let's get in Pro and see where you're at. And now I'm, a Pro user and I embrace all of those extra components for sure. So Rachel and I are extremely appreciative that you not only stay up late with us into the wee hours there to provide your value, your insights, but also where your tool has gone, where I first started using it, and where it's now is exciting to see because it's also leading the change as the industry is changing as well. So we're excited. Rachel, do we figure out a name for next week? Maybe we can crowdsource our name. We were going with Power Hour, but our community is pretty awesome. So we have our three amazing executive leaders that we're on. We have Vidar from Metal. We have Pierre from Tracker and Guy from Twtrland that are going to come back on our panel. So we can come back with a powerful name and a powerful conversation next week and get a whole bunch more insights, hopefully less of me talking, more of you awesome guys talking. So Rachel, anything else for us before we jump out of here?
Nope, I'm super excited for next week. Thank you, Guy, for joining us today. Your perspective on influencer marketing has intrigued me for years, so thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you both, Rachel and Brian. It was a pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
All right. Well, you get some sleep on Twtrland. We will be monitoring and jumping into the hashtag as we go. Cheers, all. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.